Hey y'all! In a previous video, I introduced the topic of level clipping when creating a composite 3D model in VCarve Desktop, VCarve Pro, and Aspire. Today we're going to do a little bit of modification to this file that we created and get into a little bit more advanced level clipping. As in the previous video, I'm demonstrating in Aspire version 10.5, but this works exactly the same way in VCarve Desktop and VCarve Pro. So if we go back over and take a look at our model in the Modeling tab, and I'll tile my 2D and 3D views, we created this flat round dish, then we added a couple of horses' heads to that dish, then we created a vector around the dish to clip these horses' heads through. Then I added a zero plane in a second level to give us a representation of the surface of the model and to fill in the jagged edges left by this bitmap image of our dish. I then said that I would go ahead and save this as a template file by coming up here to File and then Save as Template. And I did that off camera. If you missed the first video where we created this file, I'll put a link to it up here in a card right about now. And I've also put a link to it down in the description box of this video. So to get a little bit more advanced with our level clipping and change the character of this project, let's go ahead and get into a new session of Aspire. And I'm going to load that template file that I created. So I'll come up here and click New File from Template and navigate to the folder that contains that template file. Double click it to load. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about template creation, as I've already covered that in another video. And I'll place a link to that video in a card up here right about now. And I'll also put a link to that video down in the description box below. When you open a template file, it loads the artwork and sets everything up according to your criteria when you saved the template file. Well, I'm going to change my material size for this file because I've measured my material and I find that I'm using a piece that is 16 inches wide in X, 12 inches high in Y, with a thickness of 3/4 of an inch. Everything else is going to stay unchanged. The only thing that I have changed is the width of my material in X. And I'll get into that a little bit later on and discuss why I've changed that material size. So we'll go ahead and click OK. And now we're ready to get to work and start modifying this file. Now, if we go over to our Modeling tab, we have this flat round circle here, which is our dish. Then we added the horses' heads. And we clipped this level to this vector that we drew around our horse heads. And I'll go ahead and tile my 2D and 3D view, and we can see that's what has happened. I then created another level and added a zero plane, which filled in these rough edges and gave us a representation of our model surface. Well, now what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of text up here. I want to put a name up in this area right here. So what I'm going to do to start with is go back over to my drawing tab, and we'll maximize my 2D view, press the letter F, and I'm going to go ahead and create my text. So we'll go into the Draw Text window, and I'm going to choose a simple font for this demonstration. I'm going to use the Arial font, which is probably the most common font out there. I want my text height to be 1.5 inches, and I'm going to anchor that text at my X0, Y0, and I want the text aligned to the center. I think I'm going to go ahead and switch over to bold for this font because it's not a very thick font to begin with. So I'll put a check mark in bold, then I'll come up here and I'll enter my text. With my text created, I'll go ahead and close that. And I'm just going to move it up a little bit here to get it away from my horses. First thing I want to do is I want to look at my text spacing because I'm going to be using a fairly small bit. I want the spaces down here to be big enough to allow that bit to get in between them all. And I'm a little bit close together over here. So I'll go to Edit Text Spacing and Curve. And I'm going to come over here between this E and this L. And I'll hold down Shift. Click once to spread them apart a little bit. And I'll come over here between these two L's. And I'll click once. And between the L and the E, I'll do the same. And that should be enough distance to allow my bit to get in between all of these letters. So I'll go back into standard selection mode. And now I want to place my text upwards a little bit, and I want to make sure it's centered within the dish. So I'll go over here, click it again to go into Move and Transform mode, and let's bring this up. Now, as I move this, pay attention to these vectors where they interact with this dish shape. Click and I'll push up, and you see where that text interacts with that slope. You can see that they turn light blue. That's just kind of letting me know where that text vector is in relation to that slope. Now, if you look at the top of my C, you can see there's one corner up there that's light blue. That looks okay right there. I don't want this letter C to be too close to where this transitions from gray to white, because that means this C is going to be right on top of where this dish starts. And that's okay for straight portions of the text, but it doesn't look very good with a curved letter like this. We get a lot of stepping over here from the ball nose bit. Let me go ahead and align my text now to the center of my material. That kind of nudged it over a little bit. All right, so that's got my text inserted into my drawing. Now what I want to do is come back over to my modeling tab, and I'm going to need to create a new layer. Again, remember that VCarve Desktop, VCarve Pro, and Aspire, all three model from the bottom up. That's important to remember. So I'll need to add another layer and then clip that layer to this text vector. So we'll go ahead and we'll right-click on either of the level titles, and we'll choose Insert a New Level. Now, right now, there is no model on this level to clip, so I'll need to put a 3D model on this level. and then size it so that I can clip the text to that model. So what I'll do is I'll select my flat round circle, and I'm going to hold down the Control button, then click and drag a copy up onto level 3. So now you see I have a copy of my flat round circle on this level and on the first level. Let's go ahead and turn these two levels off just for a minute, because we only want to work with our clipping level. Now if we tile the 3D view, we have our dish here. What I need to do is I need to move this dish and increase its size to where it's covering all of this text. I want the flat part of this model to cover all of this text. So we'll expand our 3D view, tap the letter F on the keyboard to center it up, just kind of zoom it back out a little bit, and put the model in Move and Transform mode. Move over here to the center and drag it up. I want the center to be over my text. Then I want to hold down Shift and expand the size. Now right now I can't see a thing, so I'll click off again, and now I can see that my text is in the center of that dish. Now if I go over here, tile my 2D and 3D view, I have kind of a mess. Don't worry, we'll clean it up. Let's turn back on this level and turn back on this level. Now I want to select my text, come up here to level 3, right click, clipping, apply. We still have a mess, but that's because of my combine modes. It has clipped my text, but if we look, my flat round circle, the combine mode is set to subtract. So it's trying to subtract that text from this model. So we'll right click, change the combine mode to add. And that's a little bit better, but it's still a mess. Let's change the combine mode of the level to merge. And that merged the entire model surface with my zero plane. Again, remember, the zero plane becomes a part of the model. All is fine, except now my text is projecting way too high up. So I'll need to get into the properties of my flat round circle, and we see that that shape height is way, way too thick. I only want my text to project up from the zero plane by about 1/8 of an inch. So let me change that shape height to 1/8 of an inch. We'll let it update, and we see now that that text will project above our zero plane by 1/8 of an inch. Now I know that looks a little convoluted and confusing, so let me go through that again. I added another level, copied my flat round circle up to that level, selected my text vector, and clipped the text to these vectors. Well, now I can close, and I have my 3 levels now. So now I know this looks like a mess, but believe me when I say it will clean up in the end. Click off, select F to center everything up. Now what I want to do is I want to create a couple of rectangle vectors out here. I know that I want my plaque to be 12 inches high in Y and 12 inches wide in X. So I'm going to create two rectangles. I'm going to create one rectangle that is 12 inches by 12 inches to act as my profile cutout. So we'll click on Draw Rectangle. I want the anchor point to be the center of the rectangle, and I want it centered on my X0, Y0. I want square corners, and I want my width in X to be 12 inches, and I want my height in Y to be 12 inches, and I'll create that rectangle. That rectangle is going to be my profile cutout. When I machine this 3D model, I'll be using a ball nose bit. If I use this vector as the machining boundary, I'm going to have a radius right here along this edge all the way around, because the center of the bit is going to come up to this vector boundary. I want that bit to go past just a little bit so that I have a nice flat area here along the edges. So I'll create a second rectangle that is 1/4 inch wider in X and 1/4 inch higher in Y. I'll create that vector, and this is the vector I'm going to machine my 3D roughing and my 3D finishing toolpaths to. Then I'll come back and use this vector as my profile cutout. So let's go over here to our Toolpath tab, and the first thing I want to do is I want to go into Material Setup. So I'll click Set, and I'm going to look everything over and make sure it's safe and appropriate. I have a material thickness of 3/4 of an inch. My XY datum is set to the center. If I was going to change that for any reason, now is the time I would do it. I'll go ahead and leave it in the center for this demonstration. My Z0 is going to set to the material surface. I have no gap above the model. My model thickness is a total of 0.625. That is the 1/2 inch depth of my dish plus the 1/8 inch height of my text. So I have added an 1/8 of an inch of height to this model thickness. Everything looks safe and appropriate. I'll go ahead and click OK. Now, when we imported this template file, it included the two tool paths that I had already calculated when we created our horses. Because I've added that text, the thickness of the model has changed. So it's telling me that these material setup values have changed, and all tool paths must be recalculated. Now it's asking me what I like to recalculate now. I don't want to recalculate because I'm also going to be changing my machine limit from this vector to this vector. So I'll click No. Now what I want to do is go ahead and go back into my 3D roughing toolpath, and here's exactly what I mean. We see this vector is selected because that is the vector we were machining to. We no longer want to machine to that vector, so I'll click off. The first thing I want to do, however, is I want to select my tool. In this case, I am going to use my 1/4 inch end mill. Now I'll move down to my machining limit, and it's going to be the selected vector. That vector is this larger of the two out here. Remember, the 0 plane becomes part of the model. That's why I created this vector to machine to. This leaves me area out here to mount my material to my spoil board, and I don't have to worry about that bit hitting a screw or a clamp out here. So I'm going to machine to this vector. I'm not going to use a boundary offset. I'm going to leave a machining allowance of 0.02. I'm going to use a Z-level roughing strategy, and we'll call this 3D roughing, and we'll recalculate the toolpath. We now see that our text has been added to this roughing toolpath. I'll go ahead and we'll preview it. With our toolpath previewed, I can rock this back over here and we can see that our text is standing proud out here, but also standing proud out here. Now we'll need to go ahead and recalculate our 3D finishing toolpath. So I'll close my preview, double click, go back over to my 2D view, and again we have that vector selected. I'll click off to deselect. And I'll go up here and I'm going to use a 1/16 of an inch ball nose bit. Again, I want to change my machine limit boundary to the selected vector, this large one out here. Because again, I want the radius of this bit to come past my profile cutout. I'm not going to change anything else. I'll calculate it. With our toolpath calculated, we'll go ahead and preview this toolpath. With our preview complete, we can take a look and we can see that if I look at my readouts down here, up here I'm at Z0, but down here I've carved about 1/8 of an inch down, leaving this text standing proud. It tapers down into the dish the way I wanted it to, and this text stands proud of my dish. Well, now let's go ahead and close our preview, go back in our 2D view, and I want to do my profile cutout. So I'll select the inner rectangle, my 12-inch by 12-inch rectangle, do a standard profile. I want to set my cut depth to go Z plus 0.005 of an inch. I want it to cut all the way through the material and into my spoil board just slightly. Then I'll tap the equals button and it sets my depth of cut. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch end mill. I'm going to machine to the outside of this vector. If I were actually going to cut this plaque, I would do a separate last pass with an allowance of 0.01. I would add tabs. I'm not going to for this demonstration. I would ramp in my plunge moves. I'm not going to for this demonstration, but I do want to make sure I have sharp external corners checked here. We'll call this cut out, and we'll calculate the tool path. I get the warning that the tool will cut through the material. Okay, I want it to. And now we'll preview that tool path. And our plaque has been cut free from the waste. I can double click to get rid of the waste. And there we have our finished plaque. If we go back over here to our drawing tab, go into the 2D view, go into our modeling tab, and I've clicked off to deselect all of the models. Again, it was creating another level, creating the vectors to clip to, and then copying a model to clip. That's what created our text. We could add more models, we could add more vectors, we could add more artwork. But each one should be on its own level, and the level clipping for that component should remain separate from any previous levels. Something I'm very, very bad at is renaming levels. And that's something I need to work on. So let's do that right now. We'll rename level 3. We'll call it text. And then I'll add a hyphen. I'll add the word clipped to remind me that that is a clipped level. Here, I'll rename this horses. Clipped. Tap the Enter key to rename that level. That's letting me know that this is where my horses are and that this level is clipped. My zero plane is not clipped. Now, I mentioned before that when you create a template file, that template cannot be changed. All you can do is save a new template file and delete the old one. Well, I don't want to delete the old template file. I want to create a new one. So what I'll do is come up here, File, Save as Template. I'm going to click on this one to copy this name, but I'm going to come back in and call it Level Clipping 2, Aspire Template File, Save. Now this file has been saved as a template. Should I want to, I could go back into this template and select my text and change that text in a new file. It will not change the template. It will only change the file. Now, I have saved this as a template, but I have not saved this as a standard CRV or CRV3D file. Now I'll need to do that. So I'll come up to File, Save As, and I'm going to call this Horse Head Michelle. I'll save it. I can come back over to my Toolpaths tab, close my preview, and I'm ready to save G-code. As complex as this file may look, I'm only using 2 bits to carve this entire file. 1/4-inch end mill for my 3D roughing, a 1/4-inch end mill for my profile cutout, and a 1/16-inch ball nose for my 3D finishing. So I hope you got something out of this video. While it may look complex, the thing to remember is keep your levels separated, and if you add more components and you add more processes, put them on their own level. It's easier to control the combine mode and the level clipping when you have them placed on separate levels. Also remember that the software models from the bottom up. We have added this level above our zero plane because we want this model to be clipped on top of this zero plane. So, again, I hope you got something out of this video. And if you did, I hope you'll give me a thumbs up. Now, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions on level clipping and adding more components as you make the model more complex. So this afternoon, at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, I'll be hosting a live Q&A session right here on my YouTube channel where we can discuss anything I've covered in this video. Again, that's this afternoon at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, right here on my YouTube channel. These live Q&A sessions are a great reason to go ahead and click that red subscribe button down below this video panel. Then when you subscribe to my channel, click that notification bell right next to that subscribe button. Then click it a second time and set that to all notifications. Then you'll get a notification the next time I post a video and the next time I go live. So I hope to see you this afternoon for the live Q&A session. And as always, whether you subscribe to my channel or not, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to watch, and y'all take care.